In 399 BC, Socrates stood trial in Athens, not for theft or treason, but for corrupting the youth and disrespecting the city's gods. In truth, his real crime was asking too many questions. For years, he wandered the streets interrogating politicians, poets, and everyday citizens, dismantling their assumptions and exposing contradictions. He didn't offer answers. He forced people to think. And that, in a society priding itself on reason and freedom, proved unforgivable. When Socrates pushed freedom to its limits, the very people who praised truth turned on him. His trial was a formality. His true offense was revealing the cowardice and moral hypocrisy beneath the surface of collective virtue. The men who condemned him weren't afraid he was wrong. They feared he was right. They feared the loss of comfort, the collapse of consensus, and being forced to confront their own ignorance. By killing him, they weren't defending morality. They were shielding themselves from the discomfort of thinking independently. Herd morality emerges in moments like these, when people, unable to bear the weight of freedom, band together to silence anyone who dares to think or live authentically. Cowards rarely attack alone. They hide behind collective virtue to destroy what makes them uncomfortable. How often do people follow moral rules just because everyone else does? Few ever stop to ask why something is right or wrong. Most don't want that burden. It's easier to obey than to choose. So when someone questions those rules, the group retaliates, not out of principle but out of fear. Morality becomes a safe space, a mask, a way to avoid responsibility. It protects people from blame, from judgment, and from their own choices. Obedience means never having to face the terrifying abyss of true freedom. And that's the heart of it. Real freedom demands courage. It demands introspection, the willingness to be wrong, to be judged, to stand alone. But most people prefer the comfort of conformity, even if it means living without authenticity. So when someone lives freely, outside the rules, they become a threat. Not because they're dangerous, but because they reflect everything others lack the courage to be. You see this everywhere, in schools, workplaces, social media. One person questions the norm, and the group turns on them. But notice, these attacks are almost always cloaked in morality. People claim to defend values, when in truth they're defending their comfort. Morality becomes a weapon, a way to justify cruelty while feeling righteous. Cowards with a moral cause are more dangerous than those who admit fear, because they believe their actions are noble. Herd morality, as Nietzsche pointed out, isn't about goodness. It's about control. It punishes those who don't conform, crushes those who dare to think differently. And the danger lies in the fact that people truly believe they on the side of good. That self-righteousness makes them ruthless. They'll destroy lives under the illusion of justice, never seeing their own insecurity. This kind of morality doesn't elevate, it levels. It doesn't inspire growth, it enforces sameness. It keeps society predictable, manageable, and obedient. Throughout history, societies have enforced moral codes to suppress dissent and preserve the status quo. The more universal the morality, the easier it is to control behavior. When everyone thinks the same, you eliminate risk, spontaneity, and freedom. Authenticity, diversity of thought, and personal values become threats. Today, this dynamic persists in new forms. People are taught there's only one correct way to live, speak, and think. Anyone who challenges that is attacked, not because they're wrong, but because they disrupt the illusion of certainty. And again, the weapon is morality. With it, cruelty feels justified, violence feels righteous. You're not punishing, you're protecting, so return to Socrates. Over 2 millennia have passed, but the pattern endures. Athens called itself free, yet killed the man who dared to ask uncomfortable questions. Socrates exposed the fragility of their moral consensus, and for that, they silenced him. Socrates' death was not a failure of democracy alone. It was a revelation of how easily freedom can be betrayed when people fear what it truly demands. Real freedom doesn't mean doing whatever you want. It means taking full ownership of your choices, your beliefs, and your actions. It means being willing to stand alone, to think independently, and to live without the safety net of inherited norms. Most people don't want that kind of freedom. They want comfort. They want the illusion of goodness without the burden of judgment. And so, herd morality thrives. It disguises fear as virtue, obedience as integrity, and conformity as wisdom. People cling to it because it offers protection. Protection from the terrifying responsibility of creating meaning on their own. If you live by the rules others gave you, you're safe. If something goes wrong, it's not your fault. You were just following the script. But when someone comes along and tears up the script, asks why, the herd feels exposed. They realize they've been sleepwalking, echoing beliefs they never examined, living lives they never chose. The authentic individual, then, becomes a mirror, not of what the herd is, but of what it isn't, and that reflection breeds resentment. It's not the rebels' beliefs that offend people, it's the reminder that they themselves gave up the right to believe anything at all. That's why attacks on nonconformity are so often cloaked in moral language. People don't say, "This person threatens my comfort." They say, "This person is dangerous, immoral, offensive." Morality becomes the justification for persecution. It gives the crowd permission to destroy someone while feeling virtuous. This is why herd morality is so insidious. It doesn't just demand sameness, it convinces people that punishing difference is righteous. We've seen this pattern repeat through history. Socrates wasn't the last. So many thinkers, artists, rebels, and prophets have been silenced not because they were wrong, but because they revealed uncomfortable truths. They didn't just oppose the herd, they exposed it. And the herd always responds the same way, with moral outrage, collective condemnation, and the comforting lie that they're defending what's right. But the truth is this: morality, when imposed and unexamined, becomes just another form of control. It ceases to be a guide for living well and becomes a tool for suppressing freedom. The more people cling to prepackaged values, the less they are required to think, question, or grow. They outsource their conscience to the crowd, and with that, they lose themselves. Socrates understood this. He chose death over silence because to stop questioning would have been a betrayal of his very being. He knew that living without truth, even an uncomfortable truth, is not living at all. His death wasn't a tragedy because he was defeated. It was a tragedy because it proved how deeply people fear freedom, and that fear still rules. Today, it's dressed in new language, political correctness, cultural norms, public opinion. But the core is the same. People are punished not for being harmful, but for thinking differently. They're shamed, mocked, or ostracized, not for doing wrong, but for daring to ask the wrong questions. The more society praises freedom, the more it quietly fears those who exercise it to its fullest extent. So the lesson is not just historical, it's deeply personal. Ask yourself, do you believe what you believe because you've thought it through? Or because it's what you were taught? Do you follow moral rules because they make sense to you? Or because breaking them would make others uncomfortable? Are your values yours or borrowed? True morality isn't imposed, it's earned. It's built slowly, painfully through experience, reflection, and the courage to be wrong. It means risking judgment, standing alone, and taking responsibility for your convictions. It's not easy. That's why most people don't choose it. They choose safety. They choose the herd. But if you want to be free, truly free, you must be willing to question everything, including morality itself. You must have the courage to walk alone, to face the void without a script. That's what Socrates did. That's what every authentic life demands. And that's what the herd will always try to destroy. Socrates didn't die because he posed a real threat. He died because he made people uncomfortable. He was a mirror, one that reflected the cowardice and conformity of an entire society. What's especially telling is that Socrates could have fled. He had the chance, but he chose not to. He chose to stay and drink the hemlock. Why? Because he understood that his death would speak louder than his escape ever could. His execution would prove the very point he had always defended, that the societies which boast the most about their freedom are often the least tolerant of those who truly think for themselves. He chose to die authentic rather than live obedient, and that choice echoed through the centuries of philosophy because it showed a simple, brutal truth. The price of thinking for yourself can be extraordinarily high, but for some, it's a price worth paying. Today, they won't kill you with poison. They'll kill your reputation. They'll isolate you. They'll take away your opportunities. They'll ridicule you, slander you, label you dangerous. The method has changed, but the motive hasn't. Societies that pride themselves on freedom still punish anyone who dares to live outside the consensus. And as always, the attack comes cloaked in morality. People won't say you make them uncomfortable. They'll say you're immoral, harmful, offensive. Morality becomes the weapon of choice. The crowd doesn't realize they're reenacting the exact same mistake Athens made. But why do they do it? Why does someone who challenges moral norms provoke such cruelty? Nietzsche had a disturbing answer. Behind many moral judgments lie envy, resentment, and a sense of powerlessness. When someone lives with freedom, authenticity, and courage, it reminds others of everything they didn't dare to be. That reflection hurts, and to escape that pain, the crowd doesn't look inward. It looks for someone to destroy. They don't want to understand you. They want to prove you're wrong. Because if you're right, then they've wasted their lives in fear and conformity. This is the dark psychology behind moral judgment. We rarely judge to defend a principle. We judge to soothe an emotion, envy, resentment, insecurity. Most people don't hate authenticity because it's wrong. They hate it because it exposes them. And that exposure is unbearable. Nietzsche called this slave morality, a morality invented by the weak to punish the strong. It doesn't aim to elevate anyone. It aims to pull down those who rise above. It's not about justice. It's about enforcing a false equality, where no one dares to be too free, too bold, too independent. And when someone refuses to be domesticated, they must be destroyed, because their very existence is a silent accusation. There's something deeply addictive about judging others. Pointing the finger makes you feel superior. Even if your life is a mess, you can still feel morally above someone else. And that illusion of superiority gives a fleeting sense of power. It's why people live to condemn, not because they stand on firm principles, but because judgment makes them feel big. Social media turned this into a mass addiction. With a few clicks, you can destroy someone you've never met. You can be part of a moral mob, feel righteous, and never face the consequences. It's the perfect system for cowards. Instant outrage, anonymous cruelty, collective violence. The tribunal is always ready, and it needs no evidence. It just needs a target. But look closely. This pleasure is hollow. It doesn't improve anyone's life. It doesn't build anything. It simply distracts people from their own mediocrity. And like any drug, it creates dependency. The moral mob is always looking for its next hit, its next target to shame, its next sacrifice to the gods of consensus. This is the danger of crowds. Crowds erase responsibility. In a group, people stop thinking for themselves. The crowd decides what's right. And when the crowd moves, it crushes anything in its path. Socrates wasn't condemned by a tyrant. He was condemned by ordinary citizens who believed they were doing the right thing. They raised their hands and voted for death, and they went home feeling virtuous. Today, the same process plays out, only faster, louder, and on a global scale. You can wake up to discover that thousands of strangers have judged and condemned you based on a distorted fragment of who you are. The verdict is instant. The sentence is destruction. And those who carry it out believe they are fighting for morality. Just like the citizens of Athens, the parallels are chilling. In both cases, the crowd believes it is just. In both cases, it acts with ruthless cruelty. The facts don't matter. Truth doesn't matter. The crowd wants blood, and morality gives it permission. As long as they believe they're on the right side, people will do anything. They'll lie, they'll slander, they'll ruin lives, and they'll never feel guilty because they were defending the good. But the moral mob doesn't care about good. It cares about consensus. And when someone threatens that consensus, when someone dares to live differently, they become the enemy. Authentic people provoke a visceral reaction, not because they do harm, but because they reveal a truth others want to avoid, that they had a choice, that they didn't have to conform, that they could have been free. Authentic people don't preach, they don't need to. Their existence is the message. They show just by being that another way is possible, and that alone is dangerous, because if freedom is possible, then what excuse do you have for choosing fear? What excuse do you have for living behind a mask? That's why authenticity is hated so deeply. It isn't because of what the person says or does, it's because of what they represent. A mirror, a reminder, a challenge. And so the herd attacks, not out of principle, but out of panic. It must destroy the person who lives freely, because that person is proof that everyone else chose slavery. This isn't a bug in the system, it's the system itself. Herd morality exists to suppress difference, to crush individuality, to enforce sameness, because the more predictable people are, the easier they are to control. That's why society reacts so violently to the truly free, not because they threaten order, but because they threaten illusion. The illusion that everyone is free, the illusion that obedience is virtue, the illusion that there's only one right way to live. So when you see someone living authentically, understand what's really happening. That person is carrying a weight. They're paying a price. They're facing the fear, hatred, and envy of those who didn't have the courage to do the same. And they're doing it alone. Because standing beside someone who challenges the consensus takes a kind of strength most people will never know. But it's the only strength that matters. They are judged, attacked, and condemned, all because they dared to be themselves, because they dared to think independently, because they chose to live outside the rules of the collective, and the collective never forgives that. To live beyond consensus is to pay a high price, loneliness. When you think for yourself and refuse to adopt the morality handed to you by the group, you inevitably distance yourself. Most people aren't interested in thinking. They want the comfort of belonging, the safety of ready-made answers, and when you no longer offer that, they withdraw. Not because you're wrong, but because you unsettle them. You make them question, and people fear that. The loneliness of independent thought is deep. It's not just about lacking company, it's about lacking understanding. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone, because no one sees the world the way you do. They look at you with suspicion, as if you're dangerous, and maybe you are, a threat to the fragile peace they've built around conformity. This loneliness can be crushing. It can lead you to doubt yourself. It might seem easier to give in, to pretend, to believe what everyone else believes. And many do exactly that, not because they've changed, but because the cost of authenticity is too high. They return to the herd for relief, not conviction, and the herd welcomes them back on the condition they never question again. But some choose differently. They endure the isolation, the judgment, the misunderstanding. They hold on to their integrity even when it costs them everything. These rare individuals choose truth over comfort, authenticity over acceptance. And that courage, that refusal to betray oneself, is what sets them apart from those who merely survive by repeating what they re-told. Their solitude isn't just social, it's existential. It's the feeling of being fundamentally out of sync with the world, that your values echo nowhere, that you could scream and no one would hear, and it shakes you. You ask, if everyone sees things one way and I see another, am I wrong? But that's the trap. Truth isn't a democracy. History is full of majorities who believed nonsense, supported atrocities, destroyed innocence. Numbers don't determine what's right. Often, being alone is a sign you're thinking clearly. When everyone agrees, it's likely no one is thinking. The price of freedom is loneliness, but the reward is authenticity. To live knowing you are true to yourself, that your choices are your own, that your life is not a copy. For some, that's worth more than approval, because when they look in the mirror, they see someone real. And that matters more than fitting in. Not everyone needs to live this way. Many prefer the comfort of the group. And there's no shame in that, until they turn hostile toward those who walk a different path. When they attack, condemn, and try to force conformity, comfort turns to tyranny. That's when the herd becomes dangerous, when it can no longer tolerate difference. But there is another kind of strength, one that doesn't seek external validation, a strength that comes from within, the kind that lets you stand when everyone else kneels, that lets you stay firm when everyone tells you to break. This strength isn't inherited, it's built. Every time you choose to be real when it's easier to fake, every time you choose to think when it's easier to repeat. This inner strength is the enemy of herd morality, because herd morality trades freedom for security, and many accept that trade because independence is terrifying, because thinking for yourself means facing your doubts alone. But the cost of comfort is high. You lose yourself, you become just another voice in the crowd. Inner strength demands that you face fear, bear judgment, risk being wrong, and still stand firm. This isn't for everyone. But for those who endure, something changes. They become immune to the pressure of consensus. They no longer need permission to be who they are. They become free. History remembers such people, not because they were liked, but because they were true. Socrates, Bruno, Galileo, they weren't popular. They were condemned by their own time, and later celebrated. This is the pattern. Society punishes those who challenge it, only to later honor them once they're no longer a threat. Nietzsche understood this well. He wasn't trying to destroy morality, but to replace weak, inherited values with strong, self-created ones. He called it the transvaluation of all values. His aim wasn't nihilism, it was authenticity. He believed morality should arise from inner strength, not blind obedience. Herd morality flattens everyone. It punishes uniqueness, punishes excellence, punishes strength, because these things threaten the group's fragile unity. But Nietzsche's morality celebrates the opposite, the individual who dares to create their own path. This isn't a call to selfishness, it's a call to greatness. It's a call that resonates with anyone who's ever felt trapped by expectation, suffocated by rules that make no sense, or abandoned for thinking differently. But this call comes with a cost, and that cost is real. Attacks, judgment, exile. The herd always masks its cruelty as virtue. They'll call you arrogant, dangerous, immoral, not because you are, but because you challenge what they cannot question. This has always been the price of thinking differently. Once it was exile or execution. Today, it's public shaming, job loss, reputational destruction. The methods change, the persecution doesn't, and the persecutors never see themselves that way. They think they're defending truth. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Any of us can be the persecutor. It's easy to join the mob, to feel morally superior, to repeat what everyone else says. But have you really thought it through? Or are you just echoing the crowd? These questions are hard because they might show you're part of the problem, that maybe you are the herd, that maybe you're the one silencing others in the name of virtue. But if you're honest, you might see things more clearly. It's not always black and white. The true test of authenticity comes when the world turns against you. When everyone says you're wrong, when you're judged, isolated, hated, this is when you discover who you really are. Anyone can hold convictions when it's easy, but when it costs you everything, that's when your beliefs are proven. Most people crack, not because they're wrong, but because the pressure is too much. That's human. But those who don't crack, who remain true despite it all, they discover something powerful, that their strength is real, that their identity isn't a performance, that they are, in the deepest sense, free. This freedom is built, not inherited. Each time you resist pressure, each time you stay true when it would be easier to conform, you gain more of it. Until one day, the world's judgment loses its grip. Not because you stop caring, but because you've learned that your integrity matters more. This journey is hard, it's painful, it's lonely, but it's also the most meaningful path you can walk. Because in the end, you are no longer a copy of what others want. You are yourself. And in a world that demands conformity, being yourself is a revolutionary act. There's no manual for escaping herd morality. Nietzsche doesn't give steps. That would defeat the purpose. But he offers a direction. Think for yourself. Question what you've been taught. Build your own values. Live awake, not on autopilot. To live awake is to see clearly what others ignore. To recognize the invisible forces shaping your beliefs. To stop being a passive receiver of culture, morality, and meaning and become an active creator of them. This doesn't mean rejecting everything you've been taught out of rebellion. It means examining it honestly, testing each value, asking, is this truly mine? Do I believe this, or was I simply told to? And if it doesn't hold up, you let it go. You make space for something better, something real. Freeing yourself from herd morality is not about becoming an outsider for the sake of it. It's about becoming yourself, fully and without apology. It's about building a life rooted in truth rather than convenience, in conviction rather than consensus. But make no mistake, this is a difficult path. You will be misunderstood. You will lose people. You will be accused of arrogance, of selfishness, of madness. You will be told that you're wrong, not with arguments but with outrage, not with reasoning but with shame. The herd protects its certainties by punishing those who question them. And yet, if you endure, if you remain true, you reach something few ever do, a sense of wholeness, a clarity that can't be taken from you. You stop living for approval. You stop needing the world to agree. And in that space, you find peace. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of authenticity. This is what Nietzsche called for. Not chaos, not cruelty, not nihilism, but transformation. A moral revolution that begins inside each individual, a revaluation of all values, a life not dictated but chosen. So, the invitation stands: think, question, dare, not to be contrary, but to be free, not to be admired, but to be real, not to fit in, but to stand tall in who you are. In a world that punishes authenticity, living honestly is a radical act. But it's also the only act that leads to true freedom. And though the path is lonely, the destination is yours alone. A life that belongs to no one else, a self that is finally, fully yours. To walk this path is to leave behind the illusion of certainty. You will no longer be able to take shelter in the comfort of "everyone thinks this," or "this is how it has always been." You will stand without walls, without shields, without a crowd to echo your thoughts back to you. And that kind of solitude is not romantic, it's raw. But in that rawness, something powerful begins to grow. Sovereignty, the ability to govern yourself, to live according to a compass that isn't handed to you, but forged in the fire of experience and thought. You stop reacting to life and begin responding to it, with awareness, with choice, with integrity. This kind of living demands presence. It requires that you pay attention, not just to the world, but to yourself, to the subtle betrayals that happen when you stay silent to be liked, to the compromises you make when you nod along to avoid conflict, to the slow erosion of self that comes when you value peace over truth. You begin to notice how easily people trade their voice for belonging, how quickly they censor themselves to avoid friction, how desperately they cling to narratives that make them feel safe, even when those narratives are built on lies. And then you realize this is what the herd runs on, not truth, but comfort, not understanding, but agreement, not thinking, but echoing. To live authentically is to step outside that cycle. It's not loud rebellion, it's quiet refusal. It's the calm strength of someone who no longer needs to shout because they are rooted. It's the dignity of being misunderstood without needing to explain yourself, because you know who you are and that knowing is enough. Still, the path remains hard. There will be days when you question everything. Days when your strength falters. Days when you wonder if the solitude is worth it. When you see the ease with which others belong, how they are celebrated for repeating what is approved, how they move through life untouched by judgment, you may feel the pull to go back, to make yourself smaller, to pretend, but you won't. Not because it's easier, but because it's impossible. Once you've tasted the truth of your own voice, you cannot unhear it. Once you've seen the cost of false belonging, you cannot pay it again. You've already lost too much to go back to sleep. And so you move forward, alone perhaps, but awake. This journey will change you. You will lose illusions about yourself, about others, about the world. But in their place, you will gain something far greater: clarity. And from clarity comes power. Not power over others, but power over your own life. The ability to choose, not react, to build, not borrow, to speak, not echo. And this, in the end, is the great task. To become fully yourself in a world built to keep you fragmented, to hold your shape while everything around you demands conformity, to remain whole when the pressure to divide and shrink is relentless. This is not the easy life, but it is the real one. And those who walk it quietly, steadily, without fanfare, become the ones who light the way for others, not through preaching, but through presence, not by demanding followers, but by showing what's possible when you stop following. In time, some will understand, others won't. That's not your concern. You weren't born to be understood. You were born to be true. You weren't born to be understood. You were born to be true. And yet something remarkable happens when you commit to truth, even in silence. Without trying, without intending, your life begins to cast a light. Not a spotlight, but a steady flame, a quiet signal to others who are searching, questioning, suffocating under the weight of imitation. Your courage becomes a kind of permission, a way of saying you can choose differently too. Because when one person refuses to betray themselves, it reminds others that they don't have to either. You don't need to lead them. You don't need to teach or convince or inspire. Just by existing as you are, unbent, you become evidence that another way is possible. This is the strange paradox of the path. It's walked alone, but it echoes far beyond you. Legacy, then, isn't about being remembered. It's not about your name carved in stone or your image held up by future generations. It's something more subtle, more powerful. Legacy is the ripple you leave in the souls of those who met you and dared to live more honestly because they did. Maybe they never told you, maybe they never will, but they saw you. They felt your presence. And in a quiet moment, in a private struggle, they remembered how you stood firm, how you didn't flinch, and they found their own strength. This is how truth spreads, not like wildfire, but like embers, quietly, patiently, soul to soul. And when you live like this, you begin to realize you never needed the herd's approval. You never needed to be liked or applauded or accepted. What you needed, what you were always searching for, was yourself. And now that you've found that, no one can take it from you. But this doesn't mean the path gets easier. In some ways, it gets harder. The more you grow into yourself, the more acutely you feel the dissonance with the world around you. The more clearly you see the compromises others make. The more deeply you grieve the parts of yourself you once silenced to belong. And still, you keep going, because you are no longer seeking comfort. You are seeking wholeness. You are no longer chasing applause. You are chasing alignment. You are no longer trying to fit into someone else's story. You are writing your own. And slowly the loneliness shifts. It doesn't disappear, but it deepens into solitude. Solitude becomes your sanctuary. Silence becomes your teacher. And in that silence, you begin to hear things you never could inside the noise. Your instincts, your desires, your truth. You begin to feel at home in yourself. And then one day, without fanfare, you look back and realize something extraordinary. You didn't just survive. You didn't just resist. You lived. Truly, deeply, authentically. And that, more than comfort, more than applause, more than belonging, is the real victory. And that, more than comfort, more than applause, more than belonging, is the real victory. Because in a world built on performance, living with truth is rebellion. In a culture obsessed with appearance, choosing substance is an act of quiet defiance. And in a society that rewards obedience, maintaining your sovereignty is a form of everyday heroism. But this kind of heroism is invisible to most. It doesn't win medals. It doesn't get paraded or celebrated. Often it's punished, or worse, ignored, and still you choose it. Not because it's easy, but because the alternative, betraying yourself, is unthinkable. There comes a point when you can no longer go back to pretending. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you know. You can no longer laugh at the jokes that wound your soul. You can no longer smile in rooms where you must leave parts of yourself at the door. You can no longer shapeshift to make others comfortable. That mask, it doesn't fit anymore. It never really did. And so, you walk forward, barefaced, exposed, whole. People may say you've changed. They'll say you've become distant, difficult, even cold. But what they're really feeling is your refusal to shrink, your unwillingness to apologize for existing as you are, your quiet revolt against the roles they once assigned you. You begin to notice who stays, who recoils, who resists your becoming. And as painful as it is, you let them go. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because you have finally understood something. Love that depends on your suppression is not love. It's control. Belonging that demands your silence is not belonging. It's bondage. And you're done with that. You're no longer interested in earning acceptance by sacrificing your soul. You're no longer looking for rooms that only welcome you when you come in fragments. You're searching for something else now. Something rarer. Something truer. Resonance. The kind of connection that doesn't ask you to dim. The kind of presence that doesn't flinch when you speak the unspeakable. The kind of company that recognizes the wilderness in you and nods, not in fear, but in recognition. This is the reward for walking through the fire of authenticity. Not the applause of the many, but the meeting of the few. The ones who see you, the ones who speak your language without translation, the ones who have walked through their own storms and don't need you to be anything but real. You may meet only a handful of them in your entire life, but one real connection is worth more than 1,000 hollow ones. One moment of being fully seen is worth years of being politely tolerated. And until you find them, or even if you never do, you remain true. Not for them, not for approval, but because it's who you are now. Because anything less would feel like betrayal. So you walk, not fast, not loud, not seeking attention, but steady, quiet, unshakable. A storm in stillness, a soul that refused to be shaped by fear, a life that, though scarred, is unmistakably your own. And in the end, if you were to ask yourself, was it worth it? All the solitude, the struggle, the rejection, the silence? You will answer, not with certainty, but with peace. Yes, because you lived without pretending. You loved without losing yourself. You walked through a world that begged you to conform, and you did not bow, and that is a life no one can take from you. You become a creator, not because you want to change the world, but because you can't help it. Creation flows naturally from a soul no longer confined by fear or expectation. It flows from the well of authenticity, from a place where your truth meets your gifts. You create because your life demands expression, because what lives inside you is too vivid to stay hidden, because the act of creation is an act of claiming your existence, your voice, your vision. And through this creation, something extraordinary happens. You inspire, not by preaching or demanding, but simply by being, by living in a way that others see and feel is possible, by showing that freedom isn't a myth, but a practice, a struggle, yes, but also a triumph. Your courage becomes a quiet invitation, your integrity, a beacon, your authenticity, a map. People who are tired of pretending, who are tired of the noise and the masks, will look to you. Even if they never say it aloud, they'll sense in you a path out of their own captivity. And sometimes, just sometimes, they'll take a step behind you. You don't lead by command, you lead by example. You don't push, you pull. You don't speak from a place of certainty, but from a place of lived experience. This is the power of living outside the herd. You become the rarest kind of teacher, the kind who teaches by simply showing up. But don't mistake this for ease. It is never easy. The cost of authenticity never disappears, it transforms. The loneliness becomes a kind of solitude that fuels creativity instead of draining it. The judgment you face sharpens your discernment rather than breaking your spirit. The misunderstanding becomes the soil where your roots deepen. You learn to find comfort in your own company, to celebrate your own progress, to honor your own struggles. And this relationship with yourself is the foundation on which everything else is built. Without it, the pressure to conform will always win. With it, you become unbreakable, because no matter how loud the herd's voice, no matter how fierce the attack, you have a sanctuary inside, a place untouched by opinion, immune to rejection, sacred in its truth. This sanctuary is your soul, your inner strength, your ultimate freedom. And from this place, you live fully, not just surviving but thriving, not just existing but becoming. You become the person you were always meant to be, not the person you were told to be, and that is the highest form of victory. Every time you follow a moral rule, ask yourself, do I truly believe this, or am I just following because everyone else does? If it's the latter, it's time to decide. Will you continue out of fear, or will you find the courage to think independently? There's no universal right answer, but there is a right answer for you, and only you can discover it. This journey is daunting. Questioning everything means losing the comfort of certainty. You enter a space of doubt where nothing is guaranteed. You might make mistakes, feel lost, or doubt yourself, but this is the path to authenticity. To build real values, you must confront uncertainty, challenge false beliefs, and dismantle imposed values. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a long, painful, yet deeply rewarding process. Nature respects those brave enough to walk this path, not for perfection, but for authenticity. These individuals choose integrity even at great personal cost. They'd rather be alone than live a lie. They create their own values instead of accepting the herd's. They offer hope, not because they are better, but because they prove that living differently is possible, that freedom from herd mentality exists. Living authentically, even in solitude, is true greatness, not the kind that seeks applause, but a quiet, profound strength. It's the strength to be true to yourself in a world that punishes honesty, to think for yourself where obedience is prized, and to stand firm when others judge. This greatness needs no audience. It lives within you. You don't have to be a philosopher or hero, just honest with yourself. Have the courage to ask if your choices are truly yours or just echoes of others' expectations. When you recognize a lie, change it. When you find your truth, stand by it. Accept that this journey will cost you approval, security, and sometimes companionship, but it will give you something far more valuable: yourself. Nature doesn't ask you to be cruel or disdainful. It asks for strength, courage to live authentically, and to build values that uplift you and those around you. Question everything. Never accept something just because it's widely accepted. The road is hard, but it's the only one worth traveling. At its end, you are no longer part of the herd. You are yourself. In a world full of copies, that's revolutionary. Look around. How many people truly think for themselves? How many live by their own convictions instead of repeating popular opinions? Most don't. Most simply exist, parroting empty rules and attacking those who dare to be different. Maybe you're part of this too, but the good news is you can change. You can start questioning, start living genuinely. It begins with one question. Do I really believe this? Or am I just pretending? Herd morality is everywhere, in social media, workplaces, schools, families, telling you how to think, act, and live, punishing those who step out of line. But it only controls you if you believe in it. Once you see it as a tool of control, it loses power and you gain freedom. This freedom is frightening, but it's the most precious gift. Your life, your choice. Enzo never saw his ideas accepted. He died alone, misunderstood, attacked. But he lived with integrity, thought for himself, and created his own values. Over a century later, his ideas endure, inspiring those courageous enough to think for themselves. Authentic truth never dies. It may be attacked or rejected, but it lives on because it's real, and real always finds those brave enough to see it. You are surrounded by many who hide behind herd morality, not as a judgment, but as reality. Most lack the courage to think independently, but you don't have to be like them. You can choose to think, question, and live authentically. It will hurt, it will be lonely, but it will be worth it. Because when you look back, you'll see a life truly yours, not a copy, but a real, painful, liberating truth. The choice is yours. Stay safe and empty in the herd, or take the first step out, think for yourself, build your own values, and live authentically. When you do, you'll find a strength you never knew, a freedom you've never felt, and even alone, you'll be stronger than the entire herd, because you have something they don't, yourself. If this message resonates with you, you've already begun to awaken. Don't let that awakening fade. Cultivate it, question everything, think for yourself, and live by your values, even if the world opposes you, because that is the only way to truly live. If you're ready to keep walking this path, remember, you're not alone. There are others awakening, questioning, and choosing authenticity every day. It's a community built not on conformity, but on courage and honesty. Together, you can support each other through the challenges, the loneliness, and the doubts. But this journey is personal. It requires constant reflection and bravery. You will face moments when giving in to the herd seems easier, when the fear of rejection or failure feels overwhelming. In those moments, remind yourself why you started. Remember the freedom that comes from living your truth. Remember the strength that grows with every choice made authentically. Don't rush the process. Growth takes time. Allow yourself to stumble and learn. Celebrate small victories, moments when you choose yourself over safety, honesty over convenience. These are the building blocks of a life worth living. And as you build your own values, be open to change. Authenticity isn't about being rigid, it's about being true to your evolving self. Stay curious, keep questioning, and never stop growing. Your life is your message. By living authentically, you inspire others, not through words, but through your example. You show what's possible when someone dares to step outside the herd. So take that first step. Ask yourself again and again, is this truly mine? And when you answer honestly, you start to live. Not just exist, not just follow, but live fully, deeply, and truly. This is your revolution, your freedom, your life. So take that first step. Ask yourself again and again, is this truly mine? And when you answer honestly, you start to live. Not just exist, not just follow, but live fully, deeply, and truly. This is your revolution, your freedom, your life. If you want to continue exploring this journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next videos. If this message challenged or inspired you, leave a like. It helps others who seek their own path find this content. Share it with those you think need to hear it. And please share your experiences in the comments. Have you ever felt pressure to conform? Have you chosen authenticity over acceptance? Let's support each other in this conversation. Remember, the herd will always be there, offering comfort and safety at the cost of your truth. But you have a choice. You can stay safe and empty, or you can step out, think for yourself, and build a life that belongs to you alone. Choose courage. Choose authenticity. Choose yourself. Because in the end, that's the greatest act of freedom anyone can ever take. Until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, keep being real.